The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. On a Sabbath, Jesus went to dine at the home of one of the leading Pharisees, and the people there were observing him carefully. He told a parable to those who had been invited, noticing how they were choosing the places of honor at the table. When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not recline at table in the place of honor. A more distinguished guest than you may have been invited by him, and the host, who invited both of you, may approach you and say, give your place to this man. And then you will proceed with embarrassment to take the lowest place. Rather, when you are invited, go and take the lowest place, so that when the host comes to you, he may say, my friend, move up to a higher position. Then you will enjoy the esteem of your companions at the table. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. Then he said to the host who invited him, when you hold a lunch or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or your wealthy neighbors, in case they may invite you back and you have repayment. Rather, when you hold a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. Blessed indeed will you be because of their inability to repay you. For you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. The Gospel of the Lord. So I don't know if you noticed a common theme in all of our readings today. They're all about humility, something I don't know much about. But our readings remind me of a very charismatic governor. He liked airtime. He liked to be out there, getting airtime, promoting himself, always promoting himself. One time he went to a nursing home, and so he invited the TV crew along with him to the nursing home. And here he is in the nursing home, and he's doing a meet and greet with everybody. And he comes to this one patient, and this one patient is rather unimpressed. And the governor, he's getting frustrated that this patient doesn't know who he is. He's getting nowhere with this one patient, right? And so he's trying to promote himself, but he's getting nowhere. This one patient is unimpressed. And so the governor kind of explodes and says, don't you know who I am? And so the patient looks at the governor and says, no, but you can ask the nurse at the front desk and she'll let you know your name. I don't know why I can relate to that, but well, humility is the greatest of all virtues and the most important virtue of all the virtues, because all the other virtues flow from humility. It's the cornerstone of a spiritual life. St. Augustine would say that the opposite holds true as well for arrogant pride. Arrogant pride. All the vices flow from arrogant pride. And so Jesus in our gospel, he says, if you exalt yourself, you will be humbled. But if you humble yourself, you will be exalted. What's the old saying go? Pride comes before the fall, right? And so if you exalt yourself, you will be humbled. And so humility is very important to all of us if we're on a spiritual journey, and we all are. It's very important because if we fill ourselves up with ourselves, it's all about ourselves, is there any room for God? Is there any room for others if we're all filled up with ourselves? No. And so our first reading reminds us that the humble of heart will be loved by God, loved and respected by God and by their peers. And so we should all strive to be humble of heart. It's the key to true success and happiness. And so what is humility? Well, let me tell you what humility is not. Humility is not allowing yourself to be a doormat for people just to walk all over. No, that's false humility, right? And so St. Teresa of Avila, she would say, true humility is knowing what you can do and knowing what God can do. And God can achieve all things, even the impossible. And so true humility is recognizing the strength of God. True humility recognizes that in our lives, everything is truly a gift from God. And so if everything in our lives is a gift from God, we have no reason to elevate ourselves above and over other people. Humility, true humility, should lead to an attitude of gratitude, where we're grateful for all the gifts that God has given to us. We should strive not to be served, but to serve others if we are truly humble. You see, that was the problem in Jesus' day with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. What's going on in our reading today is that all the Pharisees, they're picking places of honor at this banquet feast, right? And Jesus says, no, if you exalt yourself, take places of honor, that you may be asked to sit at the lowest spot, and you'd be embarrassed. And so strive not to exalt yourself, but strive to be humble. Don't place yourself over and above others, but strive for humility. And so this wasn't just a problem in Jesus' day with the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the religious leaders, the government leaders. Guess what, folks? It's a problem today as well. How many people truly seek to be servants? How many people? Well, everyone, it's good to strive to be the best we can be, but not to place ourselves over and above others. We should strive to be a servant. Not easy, but if you don't become a servant and you strive to exalt yourself, you will be humbled. And so Jesus is warning us. Strive not to exalt yourself. Strive for humility. Reminds me of a story. When I first read this, I was like, oh my goodness, this rings so true to me. I got to share this story about my personal life. Please try not to fall asleep. So this was back in my college days. I was working for the city of Huntington Beach, Harbors and Beaches Division. And I was in college, right? I was young. I was strong. I had hair. You got to use your imagination. I was good looking, right? Okay, so I'm coming out of lifeguard headquarters, ready to start my shift. I'm walking by, there's a bench right there outside of lifeguard headquarters. And so there's 4 girls there, and they're checking me out. And I'm thinking, yes, I'm the man, right? And I'm looking at them, they're kind of cute too. And so I'm smiling at them, they're smiling at me. I'm on top of the world. And so I continue, and they're smiling, and they wave hi to me, and so I wave back hi to them, and right then, boom, right into a stop sign. And this was not a glancing blow. That stop sign was actually bent after I hit it. Well, guess what those 4 girls were doing? They were laughing their heads off. I went from being on top of the world to being this tall in the matter of 1 second. Exalt yourself and you will be humbled. Yeah. And it had to be a stop sign of all things, right? Stop, Dave. You're starting to exalt yourself. So I've got some stop sign advice for all of us that I've learned. Stop thinking too highly of yourself. Stop thinking that you're always right. Stop trying to control others all the time. Stop thinking that you know everything. Stop always having to have the last word. Stop sign advice, because if we continue in our arrogant ways, there's a stop sign right around the corner waiting for us. Exalt yourself, we will be humbled. And so all of us should strive to serve others with humility, to see the inherent good in all people. Jesus gives us the greatest example of this. Though he were God, he took on the form of man. Though he was without sin, he chose to go to the cross to free us from the power of sin and death, to free us from the cross that was meant for us. In the gospel, Jesus says, if you have a lunch or a dinner, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. When you have a banquet, bring those that are on the margins of society. Reach out to those that no one else is reaching out to. And so, how do we adopt this attitude of being a servant, of being humble in our lives? Well, let me throw out a couple ideas. We come here to this wedding feast between heaven and earth, this banquet between heaven and earth, this table of plenty where we are filled up with God's holy presence. The love of Jesus Christ fills us up, overwhelms us with his love, his mercy, his forgiveness, his goodness. We experience that goodness on this altar. But what about people who are the blind, the lame, the sick, those that are homebound, those that are unable to make it to Mass on Sunday, but they so want to be here on Sunday? What about them? Well, the good news is we have Eucharistic ministers to the homebound and to the sick. And so they bring Holy Communion to the hospitals, to the convalescent care facilities, to people's homes because they can't make it to Mass. Great way to show our humility is by becoming a Eucharistic minister to the homebound and the sick. How about another way? Well, we have ministers who care for the poor. Our St. Vincent de Paul ministry for those who are homeless, reaching out to the homeless to bring them into that banquet feast as well. This is what Jesus is calling us to do, to be as servant to the blind, the lame, the crippled, those on the margins of society, to be there for them. Because we think about everything that we've been given in our lives, truly blessed. We should have an attitude of gratitude always. And so even our simple things like coming into the church, we're entering into God's house. And so what do? We genuflect, knee to the ground if you can make it, and get back up. If you can't, a profound bow, right? We're in God's house. And so we're recognizing that this is God's house and we're not God. And so we genuflect coming in to the church. So an act of humility is our genuflecting, our bowing. It's also an act of love. It's like, gentlemen, when you propose to your wives, how many of you got down on one knee? Right? Yes. It's an act of love. When we come in and we genuflect, it's an act of our love for God, the wedding feast of heaven and earth. It's an act of service. When a soldier goes before the king to become a knight, what does he do? He takes a knee as he enters into service. And so we're called to be people who are servants to one another, bending the knee as we come into church. You see, for all of us, it's easy to fall into the trap like this politician who was always about promoting himself, exalting himself. It's easy to fall into that trap of what's in it for me. Well, if you truly want to be great, we must seek to serve others as Jesus serves us. Amen.